It's America's gravest epidemic, drug addiction. And Southern California rehab centers attract addicts from around the country. But as we discussed on our prior show, far too many patients don't get real help. Many become homeless, and unscrupulous operators make off with the insurance money. How do we fix this system? Rehab Riviera Part 2, right now on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by...
Each new community 5 Point brings to life represents a promise delivered. Great neighborhoods are more than just places to live, they are places to connect. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
Chapman University is a proud sponsor of Inside OC and community programming. Hi, I'm Rick Reiff. On our last show, we discussed the toll that the drug crisis is taking on addicts, families, and neighborhoods, and how California's healthcare system is producing too few cures and too many scams. When the show ended, our panelists had much more to say. So let's listen. We open with Dr. Daniel Headrick, an addiction expert with 6 ideas for reforming a flawed system.
Big Pharma, since they created this, had a lot to do with this. We can use them to unwind it too.
Okay.
Some of their strategies, and develop medicines to help people get better and get retained treatment and heal their brain faster. Med schools need to really focus on addiction and pain. Barcodes for prescription pads, so it just goes into a computer. We tried that, triplicates. We tried that for years before. I don't know if you know that. And we had 3 forms, and all these forms ended up in some factory up in Sacramento, and nobody could. Now we got computers with barcodes. You can really track people that are doctors that are over-prescribing, and patients that are abusing the system. Residential treatment centers need to be upgraded to the standard more closer to a hospital care. Treatment really works, but the treatment that's going on in 80% of these facilities, it's mediocre and it's not going to work. One example is when we treat doctors that get into treatment, and airline pilots and cops and judges, 95% of them are sober 5 years down the road because they have to do a 90-day program. They're monitored for 5 years, random drug screens. Their family has to get treatment. Their employer has to be involved. Treatment really works, but most people don't get the treatment. It's like saying an antibiotic doesn't work, but you only took it for 2 days. It was supposed to be 10 days, you know? So there is treatment, but it's not that simple as detox only. Criminal justice system usually makes people worse. You take more powerful drugs, you come out more addicted than when you started, and it's not working. There needs to be treatment in jails and treat it like a brain disease. Primary prevention, nobody's really looking at stopping kids before they start. I've developed a program. I would love to talk that way. I could make a whole show, but we're promoting passion. We're promoting natural highs, healthy addictions. What's your mission? What's your purpose? What's your gift? What's your meaning in life? In 6th grade, 5th grade, 4th grade, we've even talked about that, so cultivating that.
Talk about just briefly the program, because now you're talking about changing society. I mean,
exactly.
How do you do that with a program? I mean, do you target certain kids, and where is this going on?
South Orange County. It only took me 28 years to figure this out. I mean, for 28 years I was working with the problem. In hospitals, detoxing 17,000 people. I took a break. I was going to semi-retire because I thought, hey, the big picture's better, but it's really not. Kids are using now younger than there was. Drugs are much more potent. They're much cheaper now than when I started 30 years ago. Kids are dying before I even have before they're even addicted. I don't have a chance to even work with it. They die sometimes the second time they use. Everybody has opiates in their medicine cabinets. Take a Xanax and a Percocet and 1 beer and you stop breathing. And it doesn't matter how good your CPR is. CPR is totally worthless on an opiate overdose. You're not going to start breathing. CPR is great for, pull somebody out of the pool or the ocean. It's awesome. But for opiate overdose, it doesn't work. You need the Narcan. So we said, hey, let's go and find the kids that really did what we wanted them to do. Let's do a documentary on high school seniors that never did a drink or a drug and had a blast. And let's go interview them. I went and put signs up in a couple of high schools because I knew San Clemente and Dana Hills, and it said, hey, if you're a senior in high school and you never did a drink or drug, I want to talk to you. We're doing a movie, you know. So I want to meet you tomorrow in Starbucks.
So
and like
2
30
kids
or 40,
showed up, right? No, I just kidding.
yeah, that's what you'd think, because you know, these. That's what I thought was going to happen. Like 30 or 40 kids would show up at each high school, and everybody knows who you are. If you're a senior and you made it through these certain high schools, never trying a drink or drug, everybody knows who you are, you know. And so people would come, and we would have a little panel of a teacher and a counselor and the principal, a vice principal, or something, and somebody would sit down, and they would start the conversation. They would sit down and say, finally. What do you mean finally? Finally you're talking to me. I just went through 4 years of those drug assemblies. Nobody's talking to me. Everybody's talking to the drug addicts. And they say they're the rebel. I'm the rebel. I'm not doing drugs. And these kids are wild. They have Rasta hair and crazy clothes, and they play wild music, and they have a blast, you know? So we did a documentary. It was filmed by a 17-year-old that had never done a drink or a drug. He had won some award for filming. And now we take this film, it's a little 18-minute documentary, it's got a little cartoon, but we don't even talk about drugs that much, because we're talking to 4th and 5th graders, you know. We do the drug assemblies and we just talk about passion. How are you going to get high in your life? What are you going to do besides anything but not taking a chemical?
So you've gone into schools talking about this?
Yeah, it's a blast. It's the most fun
It'd be
I've
nice
ever
to
had.
replicate it across the United States.
Yeah. So I call it Kids from the Other Side.
Fantastic.
And we're trying to promote it and actually develop a certificate that you sign, a pledge that you can sign, and you'll say, well, I'm going to get tested all the way through high school, random drug testing, and the parents sign it too. And at the end of every year, if you're in this pledge, you get a lot of fun things, gifts and stuff. And at the end, Disneyland tickets or something, or the wind tunnel or something. And then at the end of your senior year, you get a diploma that says, I didn't do drugs all the way through high school, and I got drug tested. And you get $500 to your school wherever you're going.
Do you have any way of knowing how effective this program is?
No, that's what we're doing. We're doing a pilot program now in Poway in North San Diego. We got a benefactor to because it's very expensive. That's what happened. And we had a kind of a false start a couple of years ago when we tried this. I was going to take 28 kids in one class, and it turns out we had the parents there and everything. The kids all wanted to sign the pledge, but so did their siblings. And then a couple days later, all these other classes at the middle school wanted to sign up, and it cost a lot of money. You know, we just got a benefactor to put out a lot of money so we can do a pilot program. 4 high schools in Poway, 8 middle schools are signing up, and we're going to start it in May. We're going to get the numbers, the statistics. We have UC San Diego has already said that they're willing to do the statistics, to do the outcomes and stuff. But it's going to take off in a year. I think. We're going to make it more cool not to do drugs than to do drugs. Okay. The dream, and this is the crazy dream, imagine 99% of the kids going through high school without ever taking a drink or a drug.
Now, I should point out, Dr. Headrick was recently reprimanded by the state medical board for failing to properly monitor a patient who died of drug intoxication. On our prior show, Dr. Headrick defended himself, and you can hear more about that case and his version of it by looking up the show on YouTube. Now, here's Teri Sforza. She's one of the Orange County Register reporters who has been investigating the shortcomings of our treatment system. Many of the images you're seeing on this show come from the Register's coverage. You'll also hear from Omar Turbi, operator of Hillside Laguna, a high-end treatment center in Laguna Beach. So Teri, back to you on the investigation. On our prior program, you know, we talked all about these problems. Now, what I want to know from you is, have you heard anything from state officials? Have you, from the regulators? And where's the problem? Who's to blame? I guess what I'm saying in California, who's in charge of this? Who's the person that you point to and say, Fix this darn thing. You guys have a mess here, and it's your responsibility. Who's in charge?
That's a good question. We've been trying to figure that. Well, I think that ultimately, right, our governor is in charge, right? We've been trying to engage the governor, who has not been a very willing participant.
What, you really? I mean,
yeah,
has his office?
Yeah, no, we've been trying to set up a time to talk. Here's what we found. Let's talk about what you're going to do.
Any response at all?
I know, they said, we don't have anything else to say to you. We're like, oh, let's chat, let's talk about this. And anyway, so that didn't go very well.
And that's because the governor, well, he's the governor, but he also oversees the medical board or what?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the thing that's been on a lot of comments on this, the last story that we wrote, the accountability story, that's sort of saying, well, who is in charge of this? Who's doing what? They pointed out that Governor Brown is leading the whole world on climate change, and that is great. But what about this? That this hasn't really been on the radar. There are several Orange County lawmakers who are pushing bills that would bring an inspector down, that would limit how close sober living homes can be, and other sort of programs. And Pat Bates has apparently
state
spoken,
senator from Orange
state
County.
senator has spoken to the governor, and she's going to sort of take this under her wing as her thing for 2018. And she's apparently talking to the governor, and they're going to try to work out some sort of bipartisan response that will look at this. So there's the big, in other states, the governor's saying, we are going to fix this, we're going to do something. And that sort of gets the ball rolling. There's the State Department of Healthcare Services, which oversees the residential, non-medical rehabs, which have been the focus of what we're doing, not the medical stuff. That's the Department of Public Health, the whole other sort of regulatory bailiwick, and much, it's hospital regulations. It's a very, strict sort of thing, as opposed to what's happening with residential treatment. And that's, grown up out of a lot of different, things. But the social program has always been sort of the backbone of California. We were, out here in the 70s, doing the whole, let's get better together kind of thing. And I think that that's where a lot of the social, the strong social model, the non-regulatory approach to it comes from. And, it was to give people, right, the freedom to sort of do what they needed to do. And I don't think anybody quite saw there wasn't really any money in it, really. I mean, except for very wealthy people who could afford private pay. Most of the time there hasn't been insurance coverage, so there hasn't been really money flowing into the industry. When it started flowing in this way, it was unregulated, and everyone sort of started, oh my God. So there's other states that do it very differently. Like, there's no such thing as non-medical detox in Massachusetts and a couple of other states. It's an acute situation where people's lives are in danger, and you need medical oversight for that. And so that would be, one thing that the state could decide to just not have non-medical detox. The regulators could require criminal background checks for the people who want to run these facilities. They don't do that now. There could be, more stringent requirements as to who can work here, how much training they have. Counselors, pretty much, you need to register with one of the outside. The state doesn't register or license any of the, behavioral professionals, the counselors who work in these treatment centers. You get to register with this outside, nonprofit. And you have 5 years to complete your education, but you can start working as soon as you pay that fee, which I think was like $75, and you can start working tomorrow because you're working on your, accreditation. But you can.
To be honest with you, that's really not a
specific
characterization, and you refer to them as counselors. Counselors in this field are probably a slightly lower person who is actually providing some counseling, whether it be transitioning somewhere, or you can use it interchangeably in other areas, but the state depends on those therapists, psychotherapists that you employ in your program.
Who are licensed.
Who are licensed by the state. And guess what? It takes a lot of work. Like, for instance, an LMFT, licensed marriage and family therapist. They got to get their bachelor's degree, they got to get the master's degree, and they have to spend, after their master's degree, they're going to spend 3,500 hours of work on site on some of these places. And guess what? It takes them nearly 3 years to get those hours. So you're talking about someone who's at a level of a PhD level of psychotherapy. If you have a program that doesn't have anyone like that, you don't have anything going on.
But there are a lot of them who don't, right?
But guess what? No, I disagree with you there. You know why? Insurance companies are pretty smart. They're not dumb. Insurance companies, the people that within the insurance company that authorize or reauthorize or do some of this work to give you reimbursements are LMFTs themselves. They're licensed by the state. So they know what they're doing. When you get on the phone with them or you got the clinical director talking to them, they ask them a lot of questions. So unless you're talking about programs that are like...
We've talked to a lot of patients who say, I was billed for, my insurance was billed saying that I saw this, counselor and this one, and, that I had this chest and this, and I didn't have any of them.
Exactly. I mean, there are lots of those out there for sure.
Now we discuss a drug called buprenorphine, brand name Suboxone. Many doctors and government officials are touting it as a way to help addicts and hopefully get them off of opioids altogether. But not every doctor is sold on the drug, as you'll now hear.
And so what is the buprenorphine, I guess? Do you prescribe a lot of that, or do you get people onto, medications?
For detox. Yeah.
Or for long, no, not for detox, well, for long term.
I personally and professionally don't, I'm uncomfortable with that because it's an opiate. It's still addicting. You're trying to let your brain recharge itself. It needs to make its own opiates, which is your own homemade endorphins, the natural highs. And I haven't seen people succeed. I think that is a good way to stop. It's a Band-Aid to stop this epidemic and people dying, but it doesn't treat the disease of addiction.
Why?
Because the disease of addiction has a lot to do with treating your emotional baggage, the anger and guilt and resentment and inferiority and emotional pain. And it has to do with getting in touch with your life and your higher power or your spirituality. And it's hard to do when you're on a mind-altering drug. I've seen people take buprenorphine and they feel so good that they think that they drop out of treatment at that point. Because then they think, oh, I'm okay. But they haven't worked on their emotional baggage. They're still numbing something emotional.
The drug he's referring to is Subutex. It's almost like heroin. But
but it doesn't. I mean, I've talked with a lot of people, and I've talked with people who've been on buprenorphine for 10 years, and who are living, life. I've talked to guys on it for 2 years who are living, their lives, and it's not just, I think that the set it and forget it mindset is what a lot of people are afraid of, with the medication, because you do want it to treat the underlying issues, but if it's basically going to be, at least for some people it clearly is, if it's a choice between I'm going to try to be completely abstinent and I'm going to relapse and perhaps die, or I'm going to be on this this opioid, partial opioid for the rest of my life, is that where's that trade-off?
Not the rest of your life. If it's a window to get into real treatment, yes, some people might need that for a few months or maybe even a few years, as long as they're working on the other mental and spiritual sides of this too, and the physical side. In fact, I'm trying to start a new program that actually replicates one that's up in Oakland, is in the ERs. If you overdose and you land in the ER, you wake up in the ER, they give you the Narcan, you wake up, now you're in full-on withdrawals, at least you're alive. You were blue before, you're alive. They send you out with a little letter that's for 3 phone numbers to call, and they wonder why that person comes back, because you just put them in withdrawals and you send them out. What we need to do is give them some buprenorphine right then. Give them a prescription for at least 7 days of buprenorphine to quiet down their craving center and give them a window of time to get into real treatment. And maybe if they need some for a few months, I'm okay with that. But when you say permanently, that to me is not real recovery.
Yeah, that's bad.
That's a mind-altering drug. It's a partial opiate, and I think we're playing games on that. Now, some people might need that, but what's happening, those are usually the people in their 40s that have 20 treatments and had all these overdoses and nothing's working, and they're shooting up heroin, they're going to get fentanyl and die. Maybe some of the, but now I'm getting people that are 16, 18 years old that are being told you need to be on this permanently,
The longer you're on it, the longer you stay on it.
And I spent a lot of time getting people off Subutex. They come to me wanting off Subutex and buprenorphine. It's hard to get them off of it. it's one of the hardest ones, especially if they've been taking it for years.
Finally, a businessman's perspective. Before he opened a rehab treatment center, Omar Turbi was an executive entrepreneur and consultant in computer technology. Here's his take on the drug rehab business.
The 3 tracks that are going on, okay, the state of California would like to see more treatment programs open up because the epidemic is so huge and so big, not only locally here, but nationally. So they have to watch what standards and regulations they require of these treatment facilities to open up. My experience with Dr. Dan in the last 3 years, he's adamant. He sometimes would call me up and yell, Omar, you didn't do this right. Omar, you got to do this better. And I appreciate that. When I hang up the phone, there's nothing that pleases me more than someone tells me to do something better, and I run and try to do it better, okay? So the state requires people that watch and monitor these patients/residents. Requirement is to have a TB shot test, CPR, and first aid. And the state says it's illegal to have nurses operating in detox facilities or any of these treatment programs. Because if they do that, one, it becomes so expensive. The nurses, and God knows, Dr. Headrick pays him well over the standard rates, from $35 above, to make sure that he keeps his standards high and all that kind of stuff. But you won't be staying in business if you have to pay those residents and people that take care of these people, you know, those rates of nurses. And a lot of these detox places will bring in nurses, not really full nurses, but they call them LVNs, and they give them a different title so they're not violating state laws. Now, another thing, the state says you cannot have a medical director. 99% of the facilities right here in Southern California have medical directors. The state says no. You're supposed to, when the patient admits at your facility, you're supposed to give him a choice of 3 doctors, and one of them must be at least one of the doctors that have been seen for a few years. Guess what? That never works. It doesn't. It's not practical at all to do that, simply because when somebody comes in, they're half dead, okay, they need some help, and boom, you got to take them to people that know what they're doing, like Dr. Dan and others out there, so they can get their protocol and medications, they check them out, you know. We're a JACO accredited program, meaning that we provide excellent services. And the JACO accreditation is not easy to get. It takes time, it takes a lot of effort, and you have to be—
What's JACO? What is it?
JACO Joint Commission, that's based on Chicago. It's nonprofit. They come in and run you through the ringer and make sure that you're doing the right processes. You know, like from when somebody first comes in, you gotta assess for pain, which is important. You gotta assess for nutrition, which is also very important. And now 80% of people that have addiction have trauma. Therefore, you must assess and treat trauma. So now we have people that, even though it's a little expensive, do EMDR form of treatment and somatic. So we have both on hand that we can, as soon as our patient comes in, we make sure we run them through that assessment, make sure they run through the treatment. Another component that I take a lot of pride in working on, and Dr. Dan actually is very, very much doing the same thing too, is any place, anywhere the patient has pain, a source of pain. It could be significant other, or it could be ex-wife, current wife, brother, sister. Always bring them on, whether it be through a televideo if they're far away or local, bring them on board for treatment. Many of these high-end programs, you probably know who they are, they do very little of that. They provide 90 days of orientation at the end of the treatment, you know, and that's it. You're supposed to start there from day one, getting those consents and bringing family members involved in the process. Because when you discharge somebody, you want to make sure that they're back home or whatever they are at an environment that's going to be
So do you
healthier.
do all those things?
We try. There's 2 different things. There's idealism and reality. Idealism is you can do all these things and you can aspire to do all these things. If you have $70,000 per month as one person for 90 days, we can probably cover about 70 to 80% of what I stated. And remember, regardless of how excellent your program may be, your recovery is about this much from what happens to you the rest of your life. You're supposed to keep sobriety, recovery, You're supposed to actually stay sober. There are many more things, social systems, family support. Another thing that we insist on and try very hard to do is the family members report back to us that they're going to Al-Anon meetings. That's so important. Al-Anon meaning non-alcoholic. They may not be addicts, but they have to. And they resist that because it takes time away from their normal life, but it's very important for members of the family to go to AA meetings so they learn about their loved ones. They know how to treat them and how to work with them.
And that's it for our two-part series on drug addiction. Both shows are on YouTube. Key in Inside OC, Rehab Riviera, my name, you'll find it. Thanks again to my guests, Teri Sforza, Dr. Daniel Headrick, and Omar Turbi. You can watch this show and past shows by going to pbssocal.org or rickreiff.com. You can also catch our shows and our post-show open mic chatter on YouTube. And follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by
Each new community 5 Point brings to life represents a promise delivered. Great neighborhoods are more than just places to live, they are places to connect. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
All your life, people talk about what's best for you. But to most people, it's just that. Talk. Unless you're with Memorial Care, a healthcare system devoted to one important thing: what's best for you.